Welcome everybody. So now that you have wiped off the extra underglaze from all your, lines and backgrounds and stuff, and it's been dry for a little bit, now it's time to choose your Celadons. So you want to go through just like we did before and kind of look and see what colors you like, which ones will show real well, and then figure out what they are and add them in. So like on my glaze log here, I've decided for me, I added the jet black and all the lines in the texture. I chose snow. So I chose this one. I'm going to use one coat so I can still kind of see texture. Because if I use it, if this is too thick, it's going to cover up all the stuff that I just did. So I'm not going to actually add this over any of the underglaze. I'm just going to use this on my clouds and in this part of my background on my plaque, because I know there's not any underglaze right there. So just be kind of careful with the white and with the black. The black will, the black doesn't show underglaze through it, okay? So just be careful if you need to use one of those two, okay? Then I also chose the cobalt. And I'm saying I want 2 coats. So remember on here, you're looking at this and here's 1 coat, 2 coats, 3 coats, 4 coats. So if I only have 2 coats on here, then I can still see the texture pretty well, and I will still be able to see the underglaze that I put on it. If I put this too thick though, then, there's no point in having me underglaze all those little areas. So I want to make sure that I use it, but I use it appropriately with the appropriate number of, layers. Same thing. So like the pear, I decided, I wanted to have blue here and blue out here. And then I wanted to have the pear around all the edges. And I thought 2 coats of that would look nice too. So that's how I chose it. And remember, it says on the bottom what it is, what kind of glaze it is, and then what the title is. So you want to list that on here. And for the process, I brushed on the underglaze, wiped it back, and then I painted the Celadon over. And I listed, like I said, how many coats on there. So now to actually do that, once you have, your stuff planned out, where it's gonna go. So like I wanna paint this part back here and these with my white. So with my snow Celadon. Now for me personally, I'm just gonna use, I shook it up already, and I'm gonna use the lid so I don't have to try to dip back and forth. Now I'm gonna do, while my brush is fresh, I'm gonna try to do all my edges and get kind of close to the underglaze, but I'm not trying to cover up the underglaze. And if I get to a corner, I can either use a smaller brush or I can kind of, turn my paintbrush. Notice how I didn't put the glaze all the way up to the bezel, right? I just used a little bit of it. Now, I kind of actually like using the stuff off the lid, and if your lid doesn't have a lot in it, but the stuff in the lid tends to be a little bit thicker, so it's a little bit easier sometimes to like scoop it. But as long as you can scoop it, you can use it. And if it's really thin, sometimes you just need a couple extra layers, right? So you're just gonna kind of go in and paint your underglaze. Now, how many layers did I want of this one? We'd have to go check on my thing. But remember to let it dry in between each layer. So, once I'm done painting all my white areas, if my first area where I painted isn't dry yet, then I want to wait until later, right? I want to wait for it to dry before I add on my second coat. Otherwise, it doesn't really count. I'm just brushing extra glaze off. So I would add in all my white. And like I said, on my white, I'm only adding 1 layer. So this would be done. Now, if I wanted to add in something else, like if I'm doing a bigger area, so like this part was gonna get cobalt, I might wanna use a bigger brush. And you have different brush sizes for different reasons, but it's still gonna be the same thing. So I'm just gonna kind of like do around my edges first and kind of blob it on a little bit. If it looks brushy like this, that is not gonna be a solid coat, right? So I wanna kind of like a little bit blobby. I can have a little bit of brushing. And remember, because this is gonna turn transparent in the kiln, as long as I get my number of coats appropriate. If it covers up my underglaze and my underglaze doesn't show as well, as long as I'm using a transparent glaze, that is gonna be okay, right? And remember also, we're trying to avoid getting glaze on the very bottom and the sides. Like, we're not glazing the sides, and we're not glazing the sides in here either, okay? Because we gotta keep the glaze off of the kiln shelf, and these glazes, if they're too thick or depending on what glaze it is, they could run when they become liquid, when they're heated in the kiln, right? When they're fired. So we need to be really careful about that and make sure that we keep the glaze off the bottom and a 1/4 inch up the side. And since we created this as a 1/4 inch thick, we just won't glaze the sides. Now the sides on your attached pieces, totally fine. You can glaze those if you want. And you know, you could do a contrasting color, or you could do the same color as your, you know, cloud or whatever. It's totally up to you. But so you want to end up glazing the whole front with whatever glazes you chose. Make sure you rinse the paintbrush in between each color in the sink, and then don't forget to, you know, you can use it in the lid, but if the color's not available in the cabinet, wait for it to be available and start on a different section, or see if somebody at your table has that same color already. All right, happy glazing, make it a good day. I'll see you later. Thanks, everybody.